Hey guys, just wanted to do a quick video. It's quite late, so I'm going to have to talk in a bit of a hushed tone. I was just going to bed, and luckily I don't need to be up that early in the morning tomorrow, because it's quite late. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning right now, and I normally, when I'm winding down for bed, I'll watch a video or two on YouTube and then usually drift off watching one. But I came across a video today that tonight that intrigued me. So Destiny does a lot of debates with people, or at least he used to for a long time, and I always thought Destiny was kind of okay. Like, sometimes I really disagreed with him, sometimes I really agreed with him. He was kind of like Marmite for me, I suppose. And for American viewers, Marmite is something that you love or hate. And basically, I saw him. I kind of fell out of favour with all the kind of YouTube blood sport situation for quite a while, because I just honestly, it just got a bit tedious after a while, I have to say. However, I did see that a YouTuber that I quite like called Brian Logan, who is a conservative black fella. I kind of like his videos. I haven't watched him for a while, but I've always enjoyed his content. And I saw that he had a debate not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, with Destiny, and I thought, oh, that'll be interesting. So I had a look at it, and honestly, it's a very similar debate that a Sargon of Akkad had with Destiny quite a while ago, but it's a much shorter debate. It's probably about 50 minutes long, roughly, the first one. They have a rematch, and I'll make another video about that soon. But this is the first video, this is the first debate they had. And like I say, it's very much like the Sargon of Akkad one, but the Sargon of Akkad one is like, it kind of goes off the rails, like, really quickly, and they're both kind of like shouting at each other, and it's quite funny, honestly. To be like, this one is less funny and more serious, but it's more concise. So if you want to hear a similar debate, but which is just smaller and condensed and more concise, this is that debate. But if you want something that's more entertaining and just like really stupid, but it's like 2 hours long, I want to say it's really stupid, but it's not really stupid because there's a lot of actual real facts in there. But like, Sargon dominates that debate, and it's really funny, honestly. It is just like a odd thing. But anyway, let's get into the points that were being made, because I had to write this down because I was writing down bits as I was watching it, because I thought I need to do this. So I am going to have to read off my phone a little bit, so if I'm not looking at the screen, then please forgive me, because I'm going to need to read very quickly. Now, one of the first points that come up with this, and I don't really remember how it actually came up properly, because this all comes from Brian had done a or is it Anthony Brian Logan? Oh god. Oh god, I'm gonna have a look now really quickly. Oh, it's Anthony Brian Logan, not Brian Anthony Logan. I'm sorry I got your name wrong. I'm really sorry. I just mismatched the things, but yeah, basically, Anthony basically did a review of a music video. He did a reaction to a music video that was basically criticising Trump supporters and stuff like that. It was quite a famous video at the time. I can't remember it off the top of my head who did it and whatever, because I hadn't heard of the guy before. It was quite good though, actually, I have to say. Like, I remember listening to it and thinking, yeah, this is pretty decent in terms of like music and stuff like that, and the way that it was worded and everything. However, I do have to say that at the time as well, I did also find that some of the points being made in it were a bit, I'm not sure if that's all quite right. But whatever. But anyway, first point in this debate between Destiny and Anthony was about abortions. I'm not exactly, like I say, I'm not exactly sure how it came about, because it doesn't seem necessarily relevant to the music video, but it kind of spirals out of this anyway. But basically, the both of them had pretty good points to consider here. some of the main points being that Anthony was saying that access to abortion is quite high, as well as contraception. The access to contraception is fairly easy. However, Destiny's point was that basically it could be made easier, and there was a big kind of hubbub about Anthony was basically saying that because there's more abortions than births in the black community, that is to say that is what shows that there is a lot of access to abortions. Now, Destiny was saying that there could have been many more women who wanted abortions that couldn't get them due to their economic status or whatever. And realistically, like, they're kind of both right, I think, on that subject. I think, like, yeah, it could be made easier. However, it's quite obvious that it is already quite easy. So I don't know where to stand on that one. I honestly think they both had good points there, and I don't really know how to dispute either of them because they were both kind of right. But one thing that came up was women using abortion or children as a paycheck, and abortion just as a kind of contraceptive in a way. And Destiny kind of just goes, well, I think most women wouldn't think like that. And I honestly think that Destiny's a little bit naive here. In this part. Now, like, I don't have loads of studies to back this one up. I do have other studies to back up my other points later, but this one I just think is more like observable. Like, if you and I think it's a very naive standpoint, because, like, to think that there isn't a big subsect of women who use children as a paycheck, I think like I say, it's just naive. Like, if you look at divorce courts or just daytime TV shows like Maury, Ricky Lake, Jeremy Kyle, blah blah blah, all these different TV shows that have like relationship stuff on it with cheating and blah blah blah, and just attitudes in life. Like, there was a big problem in the UK with welfare and children because there's child benefit, and people would literally have 5 or 6 children so they could keep getting more and more money for each child, and they had to change that because that was a growing problem in the UK. And, of course, I think what Anthony was trying to say in this debate was that is essentially a bit of a culture or a subculture in the black community, or just poor communities in general, I suppose, that basically creates a difficult situation for a lot of things. And he's basically just trying to say that these are poor choices that people are making, and we should be trying to discourage that. And Destiny is essentially trying to say, like, well, it's all kind of like out of their hands and it's not their fault kind of a thing. Like, and they're just kind of predisposed to making these decisions due to past discrepancies, which honestly it's kind of the bigotry of low expectations, isn't it? I mean, I think the whole thing that permeates through this is Destiny's like kind of unacknowledged bigotry towards black people, which becomes more apparent the more I'm going to talk about this. So the next thing that comes up, because this whole talk is about the music video that in question that they were debating in the beginning was all to do with like why blacks are struggling in America. And so the crux of this whole argument is that black people are essentially, today at least, not really doing themselves any favours. And obviously there's big portions of the black community that are doing well, but obviously there's quite a large subsection of black people who are doing not too well either, and that is where the big problem comes in. So anyway, next point about why black people have been held down is redlining. This came up, and other policies that have affected black people, but redlining became a big issue. And if you don't know what redlining is basically the practice of sectioning off parts of the city on an economic level. So, for instance, you'd say this area, this borough of the city is low economic status, so we're not going to give as much loans to this people from this area because it's less likely they'll be able to pay back the loans. And usually these areas were segregated, so usually it would disproportionately affect people of different ethnicities that were not white, basically. And that is true, that did happen. that is a legitimate thing. But did Anthony basically claims that blacks still received loans at reasonable frequencies, and that were in line with population proportion. Well, he didn't say that, but he said that basically black people still got loans regardless. And I'm saying that they still got loans at reasonable frequencies and in line with their population proportions in the cities, or just generally as the population of blacks in America at the time. And there's a couple of different things that I've looked at here that kind of disprove what Destiny's trying to say, because Destiny basically has this thing where basically, because redlining exists, black people essentially just really couldn't access loans or mortgages and stuff like that, and like they just, that is what part of the reason why there's a generational wealth gap. And I've looked at two things that essentially kind of really debunk this. So essentially, and this is just America, by the way, but so there's a paper I'm going to put the links to these in the description, by the way, so look out for them so you can read them. But basically there's a paper that investigates HOLC loans in Philadelphia, and it also then compares loans that were given from the HOLC or evaluated by the HOLC in other cities as well. And now they do. One thing that's the problem with this study is that it's a very small sample rate, so they're using like 300 loans for each city or something. I have to say, I read it as best I could, but I was doing research on the fly as I was watching it as well, so I'd pause and do a bit of research for 10 minutes and whatever. But from what I got from it, it seems that it did suggest, what I read, that loans were given in fair distribution despite redlining practices. So redlining practices were definitely enforced in some respect, yet at the same time they didn't seem to have a massive impact, or as big of an impact as Destiny might be trying to make out in this video. And it could very well be that Anthony's claim that it's more to do with credit rather than race may actually be part of it. I think race was still part of it, but I think if you were black with low credit, they were more likely to discriminate. But if you were black with better credit, and maybe you lived in an area that wasn't a red area, maybe it was like a yellow area or something, then you might face discrimination, but you were way more likely to get a loan. Stuff like that. Now, there is another thing as well, and this one was a paper from... what are they called now? I'm going to have to go on Google. I've got it here. This one was by William J. Collins and Robert A. Margo, and it's called Race and Home Ownership, A Century-Long View. So it goes from 1900 all the way up to 1990, and they talk about the trends in home ownership and mortgages and stuff like that throughout the country in the USA. And in this particular study, which is quite a thorough study, I have to say, basically they are saying that of course black people did face discrimination, but the percentile differences between home ownership between whites and blacks was not actually that huge. It was like 6% between them for quite a long time, and then there was a big rise in black home ownership from like the 1940s or so for a while, and then even more after the civil rights. And then other stuff started to happen. There was, and I think today, if you look at the rates now, they've declined quite a lot, and it's mainly due to single motherhood, because the rates of home ownership of single mothers is really low. So the more that's increased, the more that home ownership has decreased. And I think what was happening was maybe in the 1950s or 60s or something, like, oh no, that was it. In the 1970s it peaked, sorry, and it was always inclining. It was always ascending, basically, from like the 1940s or so, but it peaked at 1970s, and it was like matching white home ownership at that point, but then suddenly starts to really decrease, and until today, where it's actually reached the levels of pre-civil rights now again, up to this point. And the thing about with the civil rights thing, I don't know, we'll get to the civil rights thing in a second, because that becomes a point a bit later on. But basically, at this point, with what Destiny's been trying to say, that basically blacks have been disproportionately affected by redlining practices and not being able to get loans and mortgages and generational wealth and stuff like that, that is one of the major factors why black people are not doing very well today. Whereas Anthony was saying that basically, even though these practices existed, it's been exaggerated, the effects on black people, and actually there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, like, if perhaps maybe they hadn't created certain kinds of laws like welfare and other things like that, that maybe more that incline would have carried on after civil rights and after the 80s and etc. etc. And Destiny just doesn't acknowledge that at all. But there's actually some studies to suggest that that would have been the case. Then we get to there's another thing that comes up, and that's the minimum wage. Now, basically, Anthony says that the minimum wage caused a lot of unemployment for black males and black teens especially, when the minimum wage laws were introduced into the USA. And Destiny instantly goes, that's bullshit, basically. He basically just says there's no proof to say that minimum wage laws create unemployment. However, that's completely untrue. So what I know what Destiny's playing at here. So basically, he's been reading studies about very recent studies about recent years, like the last 10 years or something, of minimum wage laws, and that they've been increasing over the past 10 years, like minimum wages have, and that hasn't really affected unemployment. However, the caveat is it does actually have very small unemployment. It does create very small unemployment things, but they're so marginal that people just go, oh, well, there's basically no impact. However, there is a small impact on unemployment. It does increase unemployment on a small level. So it's very disingenuous to downplay that and just say there's none at all when there is. Also, it does actually change employment practices. So in the UK, for instance, we've had 0-hour contracts. And if you don't know what that is, basically it means that an employer has discretion to say from week to week how much you're working. So you, instead of having a contract for 30 hours and you know you're going to work 30 hours because you're contracted for that, you have 0 hours and you say, okay, 1 week I'm working 40 hours, the next week I'm working 10. So you don't know what you're doing week to week, and that's at the employer's discretion. And of course, the way that they tried to caveat it was, well, if you're an employee, you can, at your discretion, decline work if you want to. However, if you ever decline work to an employer, they essentially have the right to fire you. So you're basically fucking trapped, is what it is. Also, there's been a lot of part-time work now. So basically, when they say that unemployment has been hardly affected by it, what they have failed to say is, has full-time work been affected by it? Has the amount of full-time work been affected by minimum wage? And I would say it has. So that means that basically, as minimum wage rates have been rising, more and more people are working less and less hours because it's more cost-effective for businesses to do that. So therefore, the businesses have basically just found loopholes to deal with the minimum wage situation is what has been going on here. And so again, it's a very disingenuous argument to be having when you're basically just saying, oh, like unemployment rates aren't affected, and not really going into the details of what the actual effects of minimum wages have been. Also, there's another thing about the history of minimum wage. So minimum wage started in Australia, and it was to do with sweatshops. And basically, those sweatshops, after the minimum wage laws came in, a lot of them closed down. So, of course, unemployment went up. Also, as well, when it comes to black people in America, when minimum wage laws came in, it did disproportionately affect black people in America. So Brian Logan was completely and utterly right. If you Google black unemployment after minimum wage laws, if you Google that, you'll get article after article after article about the racist history of minimum wage laws. And you know, it's honestly, like, it's really painful to listen to at this point, because Brian Logan's being really calm and he's killing the debate so far, but like but Destiny's acting like a fucking petulant child. But like but yeah, you know, but yeah, basically there is literal evidence of what Brian Logan is saying, and Destiny is just obviously either unaware of it, or he is purposefully cherry picking his evidence, or whatever it is. I don't know what's going on with him, but either he's pretending that he knows more than he does, which actually I think it is what he's doing. I think he's being disingenuous. I think he's read one or two things on a very surface level, and now he thinks he knows it all, and he's pretending that he's done more research than he really has. And I've not even done that much research, and I've found this stuff already. And I was searching questions that were kind of neutral. I was just like, did black unemployment go up after minimum wage laws? It could have been yes or no. You know what I mean? Like, I could easily be doing a video here where I'm backing up Destiny, going, actually, yeah, Destiny was bang on the money. However, he completely fucking wasn't, and he keeps acting like he's got the moral high ground and the knowledge here, when he clearly fucking doesn't. Like, he clearly doesn't have the knowledge. So at this point, when I've been writing, I'm 22 minutes in, and like I said before, Destiny's acting a bit like a kid. He's been stumped, and he starts deflecting again away from Anthony's points by not really addressing any of them. And he just keeps being condescending. He keeps putting his head in his hand, and he's like oh, I can't believe, like basically like, oh my god, this guy is so stupid. I can't believe he's saying all this stuff. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. It's not really a big point, but basically he's passing off very convincingly that he's right when he's not. He's really acting like, oh my god, this guy's so stupid, I can't believe it. And it looks real, like it looks like, oh yeah, Destiny's really winning this debate here because he's not making any sense. But really, it's completely the opposite way. It's completely the opposite. And I'm not sure if Destiny knows it or not, but I don't know, I get the feeling he might do. So yeah. Also, I'll have to say that there is a couple of instances of Anthony giving anecdotal evidence, and some of it is correct. Like, he talks about his grandma and grandpa or something owning land and stuff like that. And this is what speaks to him talking about mortgages and loans and stuff, that his parents were awarded those in the South as well, which it's also relevant to the study that I looked at before, because home ownership in the South for blacks was much higher, and there was a big problem when there was a big migration up north from the South for a lot of black people after the civil rights, I think. And when that happened, that greatly decreased black home ownership and skewed the data massively. So obviously that also has an effect. So and this leads us on to the next point here, which is that generational wealth and generational issues can carry on. And of course that is true on some level. But what Destiny fails to grasp about that whole point is the historical nuance that Anthony actually understands so well. Because Anthony's point is that there is less racism today, yet many many black problems are down to poor decisions being made by large portions of black people, and this is the effect of various laws and policies that seem fair or anti-racist. So now we're talking about minimum wage laws, we're talking about getting rid of like segregation or all this stuff, or welfare and things like that. And he's saying that basically if some of these laws had not come into place, blacks would be much better off. And I think the main two would be minimum wage and welfare. I think they would be the big two that would have been more beneficial for black people to have not have happened, basically. And now it is debatable that if you change the laws today, if that would rectify anything. That's definitely something that is debatable, but perhaps championing a change in attitude for blacks wouldn't be such a bad idea, and that seems to be where Anthony's kind of going with this whole thing. He's saying that black people thrived on having a family, having two-parent households, trying to start their own businesses, being homeowners, etc., etc. Which were all ideals of white people too. And somewhere along the line that was lost because there were incentives for welfare, and part of the welfare thing at the time, I don't know if it still is, but like basically you can't have a man in the house if you want welfare and stuff, which honestly seems so fucking weird to me. I don't understand why you would do that. We don't have that in the UK, but like I don't understand why you would even do that anyway. That seems like a fucking retard's system, in all honesty. But I mean, if you really wanted to disrupt, because it's a democratic thing, welfare, and if you really wanted to disrupt black people, because the incentive probably with that was that we're poor while we're working anyway, because they had to take lower wages. This is why the minimum wage thing is significant, because black people were in employment because they basically would say, well, I'll work for $1 or $2 less than the white guys if you'll give us a job. And so they did. But then when the minimum wage laws came in, basically they were the racist people who were employing people were just like, well, if we're just going to have to pay everyone the same anyway, I might as well just hire all the white people then, because what's the fucking point in hiring black people if I can't pay them less? And that was basically the big deal. And where was I going with that? So yeah, obviously unemployment went up, and then so basically, yeah, because of that unemployment, then you have welfare as well, and so if they're already like, well, already, even if we're working, we're earning less, but now we're not working because we're all getting more unemployed because white people don't want to hire us anymore, then we'll take welfare, but welfare comes with the added caveat that we basically can't have two-parent households anymore. So, these things really matter, and Destiny is completely basically saying that these things don't matter. Like the effects of these policies, the fallout of these policies don't matter, and what matters more is past slavery or wealth inequality or racism and stuff like that. That is why blacks are still fucked today, is because of that, rather than potentially the culture that has been fostered around low expectations of just constantly drumming it into black people's heads that they are a certain way and they can't really help themselves, and then basically giving them handouts to keep them at a certain level, and then also basically making it very difficult for them to get jobs and keep businesses and stuff like that, because they basically drove them out of the work market. So it is like you have to realise that like some of these things seem insignificant on the surface, but when you really look at them, when you really look at the implementation of welfare and other things like that, it really is a big deal. It had a really, really big impact. You're talking 80%, roughly 80% two-parent households in the 1940s, and then after today, you get to 2018, it's literally the opposite. It's like 75% single motherhood in single parent households in America now, for black people. That is a very, very, very stark change. And obviously as well, like, part of the whole poverty thing is being a single parent. Being a single parent is one of the biggest factors in why you would even be poor in the first place. So having a two-parent household is a big deal in terms of how much poverty you're going to be living in. It's also a big determinant for children about if they're going to be criminal or not. That's one of the basic things of child psychology, is have a two-parent household, because you will essentially, even if you live in economic disparity, you are way more likely to have children that are less likely to be criminal. It's as simple as that. Like, pretty much every single fucking psychologist in the fucking world says that. So, yeah. So, yeah, and, you know, like, Destiny throughout this thing basically backs all these policies. He pretty much backs welfare, backs minimum wage, he backs all these things without considering the impacts that it's had on black people whatsoever. Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of weird because Destiny is just really in this debate, and probably in most of his debates, really, he's just too ignorant and arrogant to realise when somebody might be teaching him something. He just thinks he fucking knows it. He's not open to other stuff, like, or another opinion that could potentially be true. He doesn't even think on it. And he keeps saying that, oh, let's look something up. He doesn't once think to look up. He only thinks to look up to back up his own argument. He doesn't think to look up what Anthony might be saying. He doesn't once try and do that. Basically, after that, what I've just said, Anthony actually basically goes on to make that same point in the video. He says, you know, and then he kind of gives a thing to say that basically one of the reasons why black people make so many bad decisions is that there is a culture of expectations that cause blacks to act in a certain way, and that's been going on for decades. You know, they've been told that because they used to be slaves and they had Jim Crow and all the rest, that basically it's going to be harder for them to amount to anything, and therefore, what's the point in trying? So when Anthony brings this up and says that that's a big problem, Destiny then just says that that's bullshit, claiming that, like, you know, he thinks that, like, oh, so you can get over slavery, you can get over all this stuff, but you can't get over people saying that you might be shit or whatever. But what he's forgetting about a culture is that racism was a culture, okay, and that was very powerful and shaped how people acted. If you look at even if you look in other areas of things, like, let's say, propaganda against Jews caused the Holocaust, and that only lasted a few years. There was only a few years of propaganda against Jews, and then people were up for doing that. So you have to think about decades of people saying certain things about black people, have certain expectations about black people, that then they project onto themselves. And then Destiny wants to say that basically that has no effect on people, and that the past transgressions that black people today never even had to live through are still affecting them now, rather than the culture of low expectations that basically give people a free pass to carry on acting however they want to act. He doesn't think that could be powerful in some way. Now, what I'm going to say to that is, I'm going to give you an example here, and this comes from child psychology, because obviously what is brainwashed into people does really matter. So, like, if you tell a child that they are naughty constantly, they'll grow up to manifest that as an adult as well. They will continue to. They were always told they were naughty. Well, I must be naughty then. I am just a bad person, right? But if you say the behaviour is naughty rather than the child, they tend to learn to not engage with those behaviours anymore. So they learn to distinguish between good and bad behaviour rather than I am a good or bad person. Do you understand? So what Brian's saying is we need to change the culture of how we talk about black people, because at the minute the way that black people are being spoken about is that, like, well, they can't help it because they are just affected by all these things, so they just can't help it, so they're going to be bad people or whatever. Whereas Anthony's saying, no, we need to say that they're making bad choices. They're not bad people, they are making bad choices. So he's criticising the behaviour of the individuals. So yeah, this is very basic psychology, and if you even just watching daytime TV shows like about the nannies that come into houses, or like I remember watching one that was on Channel 4 years ago that was called Tiny Tearaways, and it was really interesting actually. But yeah, you can see it in basically everything. Like if you look into any kind of basic psychology, child psychology especially, then you'll see that that is the case, and I feel like Destiny should know that. I don't understand why he wouldn't know that. He seems to be quite a well-read guy on a lot of different things, so I don't understand why he wouldn't know that, unless he does know that and he's just forgotten, he didn't think it was relevant. But it's highly relevant, that point, and I'm surprised that point wasn't made, to be honest. But obviously Anthony doesn't know everything, he's not, and he doesn't claim to either. So, anyway, so we get to 36 minutes into the thing, and Destiny does something that honestly I thought was kind of disgusting. So Anthony says that despite the overt legalised oppression of blacks before the civil rights movement, that they were actually doing better in terms of, like, not only their potential, but like home ownership, everything. Despite all this redlining and all the rest, things kept going good for black people. Like, obviously not as good as white people, but they were going in a direction that was up rather than down, right? And then Destiny says, so do you think segregation was a good thing? And I don't know where he got that from, because I think Anthony was pretty clear that he was saying, I don't think he thought any of this stuff was good. He was just saying that despite these things going on, black people seemed to be able to pull it together, and we're trying to succeed, and we're kind of actually succeeding despite all this. And then today, they seem to have almost, the levels of racism seem to be almost gone, or whatever. Well, I suppose they're there, but like they're just much less than they were. Then there's not really that much legal stuff that's going on that I can think of, apart from maybe the drug stuff and whatever. But like the war on drugs, I mean, affecting black people. But like, but there's not much legal policy that I can think of that disproportionately affects black people in a hugely negative way, other than welfare and the other stuff we've covered. But yeah, I mean, but to get back onto the point, because I'm rambling a little bit now, but basically, like, I don't see how Anthony was really trying to say that segregation was a good thing. I don't get that from him at all. And then Destiny just suddenly says that. And honestly, I just saw this as an example of really disingenuous debate tactics from Destiny. He's like basically trying to insinuate that Anthony's saying things that he's not at all. And I thought it was really fucking clear as fucking day, that he wasn't saying anything like that. And Destiny just kind of goes in for the kill, and it's just really horrible to watch. I just thought that was so fucking underhanded. It was unreal, absolutely unreal. And then he tries to frame Anthony as like a race realist type, and race realists basically are kind of into eugenics and all these IQ things and stuff, and basically just be like, well, black people are genetically inferior because they have lower IQs and stuff like that, when obviously IQ rates change with different factors and blah blah blah. So I'm not going to go into that. That's that's a different video, but the only reason he even goes down that thing is because he asked Anthony why blacks choose to make worse decisions than white people, and Anthony just says, well, I don't know. And then Destiny is just like, it's just, I don't know, he's just basically trying to make out that, like, Anthony's some kind of black racist against his own people or something. But really, Brian's just trying to, not Brian, Anthony's just trying to say that basically they are making bad decisions and he doesn't know why, right? He's not saying that they're inferior, he's just saying he doesn't know why they're doing it. There could be many reasons for why they're doing it, multifaceted reasons. He doesn't know the full core things, but he's pointing to certain things that may have led to this situation in the first place that Destiny just keeps not acknowledging whatsoever, right? So because of that, yeah, you know, to me, Anthony has a lot of humility to say he doesn't know, and Destiny, to me, has a lot of audacity to put words into this man's mouth that paint him in an amazingly awful light. Like, I honestly think that, like, what Destiny did there was really, really fucking out of order, and he really needs to fucking get it together. You know, and okay, so basically, then it comes to the end of the discussion, and the call ends, and Destiny starts to rant that people can't. Well, ironically, he rants that people can't debate if they can't debate objective data, he can't have a conversation with them. And it's kind of funny because Anthony brought in objective data, and he had nothing to say about it. He just dismissed it as if it wasn't real. So, you know, what he really meant was, if people don't agree with the things that he believes to be true, then he can't have a conversation. That's what he really meant. He didn't, you know what I mean? He also says at some point, I think he says this a couple of times through the thing, but he basically just says that, like, anecdotal evidence is invalid. But what I would say to that is that if that's true, then most statistics are invalid, because they're largely anecdotal. History is invalid, because it's anecdotal. Rape accusations are invalid, because they're anecdotal. Eyewitness accounts are invalid, because they're anecdotal. Now, what I'll say about anecdotal evidence is that on some level I agree that individual anecdotal evidence is dubious at times. However, they should be considered on their own merits. So if they back up the stats or add to the discussion in some way, I feel that anecdotal evidence is okay, especially if it stands up to scrutiny. So basically, you know, there's a bit where Anthony's talking about his parents owning land and having mortgages and stuff like that, and you know, basically that backs up his claim that maybe redlining is a bit overblown. Okay, and then I looked up the things, the stats on it and stuff like that, and yes, it is true. Also, as well, the minimum wage thing affecting unemployment rates for black males and teens especially, that was also true, and he gave anecdotal evidence of that as well. He said, like, something along the lines of, like, my cousin lost his job because of this, and you know, I looked it up. What do you know? It's true. So, like I say, I don't think anecdotal evidence is always completely irreverent. There was a couple that were a bit weird. Like, he said something about living in West Virginia as a kid, and his grandma told him that, like, the Ku Klux Klan gave him gifts as a kid or something, and you know, I did find that one to be a little bit like, okay, I mean, it could have happened, I suppose, but, like, I don't know. It's hard to say about that one. I did try and look into it to see if there was any kind of evidence of Ku Klux Klan members working with black communities, doing charity work and stuff like that. I couldn't really find anything, in all honesty. I don't know if that would have been the case. It seems unlikely, in all honesty. And there was a couple of times I honestly did think Anthony kind of fluffed it a bit. You know, there was times where he was like, "You proved my point," because they got onto something about immigration, and I didn't think it was a point that was worth making in this video. But like basically, they were getting into some debate about racism, and that basically Asians out-earn whites, and you know, how can racism truly exist in the way that people talk about it if Asians are able to do that, or even Nigerian immigrants and stuff like that. And I don't know, it just yeah, I don't know, I can't remember exactly where I was going with this, but basically fuck, where was I going with that? That's gonna really annoy me now, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, basically, like, yeah. Oh no, yeah, that was it. He just fluffed it because he basically just Destiny said that his parents came long ago, like they were immigrants, and he was just trying to say, well, a lot of white people are immigrants too, and you proved my point because you're a white immigrant and whatever. And I don't know. I just think like there was occasionally points where he did fluff it, like, but you know, at the end of the day, he was dealing with somebody who was being really disingenuous with him, and saying, honestly, trying to, the things he was trying to insinuate about Anthony were pretty fucking despicable, in my opinion. I would have been pretty angry if I was Anthony, and I'm not surprised that he did fluff a couple of things, because he kept his cool really well. He really did, in trying to stay on point with everything. But of course, you can't be perfect in these situations, and I think by the end, because he did cut it short, I think by the end he was clearly seeing from Destiny that it wasn't really going anywhere, because Destiny just wasn't considering any of the points he was making whatsoever. He was just being condescending from the word go. It was not an honest debate from the start. It was honest from Anthony's side, I think, but it was not honest from Destiny's side whatsoever. And if he ever tries to claim that he was, I think this video does a pretty good job of showing that he was completely fucking out of order. If you watch that video, please watch that video. Listen to my video first, then watch that video to see how the debate plays out, and see if anything that I've said actually comes to fruition. Because I think if you watch the video on its own, it's very easy to get taken in by how Destiny acts, and how he how he kind of frames his argument to look like the right argument, just because he just constantly shoots everything down, and he does it very convincingly, but he's not really backing up anything he actually says. It's quite, he just claims it. He just goes, if you look at anything about redlining, it says it exists, but like he doesn't really give any stats or anything about anything. He just says shit. Now, I've got one last point to make. Sorry, this has been a really long video. It's about as long as the actual debate. I was hoping to make this a little quicker, but I had more to say than what I actually just wrote. But the last point I have to make is kind of petty. But basically, after the call ends, there's this guy that Destiny's talking to who has been listening to the debate, and he's trying to make out that Anthony interrupted Destiny a lot throughout the whole debate. But what I noticed was that Destiny was constantly trying to interrupt the entire debate. Every single time Anthony was making a point, by the last sentence or two that he was trying to say, he was constantly being interrupted. And that's where this whole meme of, sir, can you wait? Because there's a whole meme in the comments being like, sir, please, you're proving my point, and all this stuff. The reason why he's even saying, sir, please let me finish, is because Destiny was constantly interrupting him. Constantly. And I can't remember a time that Anthony was interrupting Destiny, really. And I think what they're really referring to, what this guy is referring to, is Anthony going, sir, let me finish, because he was interrupting Destiny, interrupting him, right? And I think this is what this guy was trying to say, is that, like, oh, he was interrupting you so much. But really what he was picking up on is Anthony was stopping Destiny from interrupting him. And again, it's just another example of disingenuous tactics coming from Destiny's camp. You know, it's just another example of how how shittily he was conducting that debate, and how he thinks in his thought process. You know what I mean? He obviously is not a particularly introspective guy. I think he comes off like he is, because I've seen a lot of Destiny stuff, and he comes off like he's so introspective and stuff like that, but I don't think he is. I really don't think he is. I think like, if he was truly an introspective guy, you wouldn't just always be like, oh, I just can't talk to this guy because he's not blah blah blah. Like, you'd be like, well, was I really reacting right there? Oh no, or would you give the fair, you'd probably give the fair caveat of, no, I definitely tried to interrupt him a few times as well. So, it's one of them. You'd think that would be there, but there was none of that. There was no humility, nothing like that. And my last word to Destiny is, a little humility goes a long way. And a lot of the reason why people don't like you is not because you're inherently a bad guy, it's because you treat people like shit, and you put words into people's mouths. And people have said that about you before, but they haven't been able to give examples, because you do it a lot. But it's tough when they're coming on to debate you, because obviously they just don't prepare in the right way. I've had time to write this down and look at one particular video with a YouTuber that I liked, and I noticed you doing these things in this debate in particular. And you did it a few times. You interrupted, you put words in his mouth, you insinuated about the man, you debated disingenuously with this man. You did not consider hardly any of his points or stats or anything. You were just constantly condescending him throughout the entire thing, and then you didn't even acknowledge any of those things that you did. At the end, all you did was confirm to your own bias that you were right and he was wrong. That's all you did at the end. You did not consider him at all, and you were just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have a panic attack if I have to keep doing this. Oh my god. You need to fucking get your shit together, mate. You really do, because it's just not a good look. Like, like I say, you're like Marmite. Occasionally, I find you really right. There were some points where I was like, especially with the abortion one at the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm kind of on board here. I thought you were giving him a fair cop, but then it just went downhill really fast. But anyway, that's everything I have to say about this video. And I'm gonna watch the second one before I go to sleep, and I'm gonna write some things. I'm gonna do another video about the part 2 video. But thanks for tuning in. Please give me a like and subscribe if you could. That's fine. I give all these videos away for free. I don't monetize them or anything, so I'm not here to try and make money really. This is just a hobby for me. But again, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, have a good evening, have a good life. Thumbs up, thumbs down, I don't give a shit. Either way, get me in those algorithms. You know what I'm saying? Alright, see you later.